good to go.
Okay, welcome everyone. It is Wednesday, May 11th, and we're here tonight for two meetings. The first is a Committee of Adjustment meeting, and the second is our council meeting. So we're going to proceed with our Committee of Adjustment meeting first because it just has one item on it, and we expect that we can get through it very quickly, and then we'll adjourn that meeting and then go into our council meeting, which I believe has 3 items on it this evening. So I'm going to ask Ms. Debbie Wood, who's our Secretary Treasurer this evening, to read the notice for our public hearing. But before I do that, I will look for a mover and a seconder from council for the approval of the minutes from March 9th, 2022. Thank you, Councillor Barclay and Councillor Strachan. Any comment or questions on those minutes, colleagues? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All in favor, please raise your hands. Good, thank you. And next, of course, is disclosures of interest. This is in regards to any perceived or real financial benefit or loss arising from the Committee of Adjustment meeting. This evening, I'll do the same for a council meeting when we get there. So any declarations of interest? I don't see any. Great, thank you. So then I'll turn it over to Ms. Debbie Wood, and she will open up the public meeting, and then we'll hear from staff in regards to the application for minor variance.
Thank you, Your Worship. The Committee of Adjustment will now hold a public meeting to consider application number A522 for lands located at 506 Prescott Street, Part Lot 27, Concession 3, Town of Kemptville, and now the municipality of North Grenville, to permit a height increase for a detached garage. I must advise you that this meeting is your opportunity to voice any objections or concerns you may have with respect to the proposed minor variance application. If an appellant does not provide oral submissions at this public meeting or written submissions before the committee makes a decision on the proposed variance application, the Ontario Land Tribunal may refuse to consider their objections. I, Debbie Wood, Secretary Treasurer, will keep a record summary of this meeting. Any persons who wish further notice of the committee's decision concerning this matter should give their full name, address, and postal code to myself, Secretary Treasurer, following adjournment of this public meeting. Are there any people here for this public meeting? And if so, could you please acknowledge? And I know the owner is here and hesitant about Zoom.
Do you see him on the screen, Ms. Wood?
It would be Gary Corville.
Okay, great. Okay, so welcome, Gary. And at this point, I believe Ms. Wood will hear from staff, and then if there are any questions or Gary would like to add anything, he can do so at that time.
I will now pass the meeting over to Director Amy to give an overview of the application for 506 Prescott Street.
Go ahead, Amy, thank you.
Just confirming that my presentation went into full screen.
It did.
Perfect.
Yep.
Thank you. All right. Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of council, and members of the public. Our only matter tonight for the Committee of Adjustment to consider is for application A0522, located at 506 Prescott Street. The property is located within the urban area of Kemptville. It's located at the intersection of 44 and Blossom Road. So it's on the main street of our main downtown. So the variance before council tonight, the committee tonight, is to consider relief from section 6.1.7 of the zoning bylaw to increase the permitted height of a residential accessory structure in a residential zone from 4.5 meters to 4.9 meters. So the sketch on the left demonstrates the current development on the property with an overlay of where the garage that's being proposed to be constructed at a height of 4.9 meters will be located. The garage will replace an existing structure that's already on the property and will be slightly expanded based off of what's there. So there is a bit of an increase, but our zoning bylaw does not restrict the footprint. And here are some profile drawings that were provided by the applicant as to the how the garage will look. It'll be 1.5 stories in height. and will take on some interesting architectural features that blend in with the character of his property, which many in the neighborhood might know as the Ferguson House. So staff have reviewed the request for the variance to increase the height from 4.5 meters to 4.9 meters and recommend to the committee that they grant the relief from the zoning bylaw to allow the applicant to construct the 1.5-story accessory garage. Again, he's just replacing an existing structure that's on there, but increasing the height a little more than the existing structure. It's the staff's policy review of the official plan and our comprehensive zoning bylaw determined that the request is minor, that it met the intent of our comprehensive zoning bylaw and official plan, and the increased height of the structure is desirable and appropriate in the residential designation. And I will take questions from members of the committee. And as mentioned, Mr. Corville is in attendance tonight. If you should have any questions specific to his proposed project.
Okay, colleagues, you've heard the presentation from Amy. I'll go to Councillor Wilson. Councillor Wilson?
Your worship, and thank you, Amy, for that. I'd just like to indicate that this new structure or proposed structure is going to be, it looks like it's going to be a beautiful addition to the Ferguson House on Prescott Street. Growing up here, it's been a great place to and an architectural bonus to have in our municipality. So I'm so nice to see this. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Barkley? Not sure if we can hear you yet. You are muted.
Right. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you to Director Martin. I assume that this is a designated heritage building, the Ferguson House?
So I would have to check on the status. I would believe it probably is, just giving it's it's a prolific building within the community. The garage is not.
Yeah, because it's a new structure.
The garage structure dates back to 1960. So it's just replacing a structure that has reached its lifespan.
Yeah. No, I echo what Councillor Wilson said. Looking just at the design, I think it's very appropriate, and I appreciate the extra cost and work going in to make it fit in with the rest of the property. So kudos.
And I don't believe we have Mr. Corville here. Did we see him drop off? Ms. Wood, Ms. Martin? I no longer, oh, there he is. He's at the bottom. Mr. Corville, is there anything you'd like to add? If you don't unmute, I assume that's a no. Okay. So with that, as Councillor Wilson said, it is a significant property in the municipality. So great to see some of the work. And I will, I think if there's no other questions, Ms. Wood, you'll close the public meeting and then we'll move and second something this evening. Oh, and you're muted as well.
Unmuted, losing my voice. So just to table the resolution, I can read the resolution if that's for.
Yes, as long as the public meeting is closed, absolutely.
We do that committee of adjustment as much as in council, at least not in my script. So be it resolved that the committee approve application A0522 for the following minor variance on the lands located at 506 Prescott Street, part lot 27, concession 3, geographic town of Kemptville, now the municipality of North Grenville, to provide relief from section 6.1.7 of the comprehensive zoning bylaw 5012 to increase the permitted height of an accessory structure from, we have it in feet, 14.76 feet to 16.17, or as Amy mentioned, from 4.5 meters to 4.9.
Thank you, Debbie, very much. So I'll look for a mover and a seconder then. Councillor Wilson, Councillor Barkley, thank you. Any other comments or questions for staff at this stage? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All in favor, please. Good. All right. That motion carries. So thank you and good luck to Mr. Corville on his efforts. And I believe, Ms. Wood, we can now adjourn the Committee of Adjustment meeting. Is that right?
That is
Okay.
correct, Your Worship.
Okay. So we are now adjourning the Committee of Adjustments. Thank you to those who are here specifically for that. And we will now move on to our council meeting. So I'm just switching agendas. Give me a second. Thank you. All right, so council is now convening council meeting number 23, being held on Wednesday, May 11th at 6:30 p.m. Of course, we are convening virtually. We look forward to being in person again near the end of the month. But in the meantime, our rural broadband thankfully still permits, for the most part, us to convene virtually for the time being. I'm calling the meeting to order, and as per our practice now, we have the opportunity to read our land acknowledgement. As some of you may be aware, the municipality of North Grenville is pursuing efforts around truth and reconciliation, and we are very pleased to read a land acknowledgement. And we take turns reading that. Is there any council colleague who would like to read it this evening? Okay, Councilor Strachian. Go for it. I think I read it last time, so I think you're up. And we just need to unmute.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The municipality of North Grenville acknowledges that the municipality operates on the unceded and unsurrendered territory of the Anishinaabe. We honor the historic relationship of the Haudenosaunee and Huron-Wendat peoples to this land. We recognize all First Nations, Métis, and Inuit who call North Grenville their home. We respect and support the need for cultivating a strong relationship with all Indigenous peoples, and we look forward to continuing this conversation and fostering the path towards reconciliation.
Thank you. And I understand in early June, colleagues, there will be a community engagement session on truth and reconciliation. So please stay tuned for that date. It's a session we've been wanting to hold with the community for a number of months now, and thankfully, I think we'll get to do it in person. So with that, I will move on to the adoption of the agenda. Council colleagues, you have it before you, and this is for May 11th. And of course, council meeting, not Committee of Adjustment. So can I look for a mover and a seconder, please? Councilor Barkley and a seconder. Thank you, Councilor Strachian. Any comments or questions on the agenda as presented? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All in favor, please. Good, thank you. Next, I'll look for disclosures of interest, and this is, of course, in regards to matters arising from those items that are on very specifically the council agenda as presented. Are there any declarations of interest in terms of perceived or real financial benefit or loss? Seeing nothing, I'll move on. Next is our consent agenda. Colleagues, you'll note that there's just one item under our consent agenda, and that is our council meeting minutes from April 13th, 2022. I'll look for a mover and a seconder for the single item on our consent agenda. I think I saw Councilor Wilson, Councilor Barkley, thank you. I will call the question. All in favor of the adoption of the minutes as per the consent agenda. Thank you. All right, that passes. Now I'm going to move specifically to the planning section of our meeting. We have a couple of public meetings this evening. So the first one is in regards to the Van Buren developments. And I'm just going to call up the public meeting script. And for those of you who are not familiar with this process, there is a particular script that one must read as part of the holding of a public meeting. And it is our obligation to read it in full. I don't see it on my screen, Amy, so perhaps you have the script, or perhaps Heather Babcock Cormier would have the script.
I do, Your Worship. Would you
Okay,
like me to
thank
read
you.
it now? Thank you.
Yes, that would be great.
Council will now hold a virtual public meeting to consider an application to amend the zoning on the lands located at 210 Van Buren Street from industrial to residential third density special exception, R324, to permit the development of 50 residential townhouse units. I must advise you that this meeting is your opportunity to voice any objections or concerns that you may have with respect to the proposed zoning bylaw amendment. If an appellant does not provide oral comments at this public meeting or written submissions before council adopts the proposed amendment, the local planning appeal tribunal may refuse to consider their objections. Any persons who wish further notice of the council's decision concerning this matter should give their full name, address, and postal code to the Director of Planning and Development, Amy Martin, via an email following adjournment of this public meeting. Contact information can be found on the notice of public meeting and will be provided at the end of the presentation. Anyone wishing to ask a question during the public meeting can do so by clicking the raise hand option at the meeting. When asking a question, please identify yourself and provide your address and postal code for the clerk to record as part of the public record. Are there people here for this public meeting? If so, could you please acknowledge yourself? Thank you. I will now pass the meeting over to the mayor to pass over to the Director of Planning and Development, Amy Martin.
Thank you, Heather, for reading that script. And of course, we'll hear from Ms. Martin in regards to the presentation on the proposal. And then, of course, we'll hear from members of the public and anyone else representing the developer. So we'll start with Ms. Martin.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I have a presentation prepared tonight, and I will note that Mr. Demchuk is here on behalf of the developer, and he as well will have a presentation to provide. And I do recognize and do want to acknowledge the majority of the individuals here joining us virtually tonight are here for this presentation. So certainly looking forward to the conversation as we go through the description of what is being proposed. So our first zoning amendment before council tonight is for 210 Van Buren Street. Next slide, please. The property is located just east of Joseph Street, and it is adjacent to the rail trail and in behind the commercial plaza that's located at 212 Van Buren Street. Next slide, please. As you can see, the property is vacant and it's undeveloped. And predominantly around the property, you will see there are existing residential uses, as well as the rail trail and the commercial plaza that's located along Van Buren Street in front of this property. And then on the east side of the rail trail, you will see what we know as 306 Van Buren, which were the former industrial co-op lands. Next slide, please. So the official plan designates this property as residential and the zoning is industrial. So the current land use, as mentioned, is vacant. It's not being used for any purpose currently. And the property is about 1.76 hectares or 4.35 acres in size. As mentioned, the surrounding land uses are existing low density residential, the rail trail, the former industrial lands, and the commercial plaza. Next slide, please. I do have the site plan ready to go in a PDF, and I will share that as we get further into the discussion and start to ask more site-specific questions related to the development. And certain Mr. Demchuk as well will utilize the site plan. Unfortunately, PowerPoint doesn't do justice to larger site plans when you're presenting the information. But the proposed development will be for 50 townhouse units. The site will feature multiple visitor parking throughout the site. There is an amenity area located adjacent to the rail trail, as well as connection into the rail trail. That was something that was very important through the development of the site to ensure that we have connectivity into that existing recreational feature. There's also a sanitary easement that runs through the property, and it's denoted on the site plan. And the proposed development was designed so that no underground work, so any foundations or any of the townhouse units would encroach into that space. And the only thing that would be placed upon that easement is the parking lots themselves. Next slide, please. So in reviewing the application, we have to give consideration to various levels of policy. So we always start first with our provincial policy statement. So that's policy that guides planning and development across the province of Ontario. The province encourages healthy, livable, and safe communities are sustained by promoting efficient development and land use patterns and accommodating an appropriate mix of affordable and market-based range and mix of residential types, as well as improving accessibility for persons with disabilities. Townhouse unit development is a medium density form of development that will contribute to a mix of residential housing types within the municipality. So trying to provide more intensification in our urban area where it's appropriate. The province identifies settlement areas as the focus of growth and development, and that land use patterns within our settlement areas should be based on a mix of land uses that efficiently use land. And new development is encouraged near existing built-up areas and should be compact and formed, mixed uses and densities that allow for the efficient use of land and infrastructure. And I wanted to note that Van Buren Street has existing infrastructure and public services available to support this development. Next slide, please. The United Counties official plan is the guiding policy document for planning for the United Counties of Leeds and Grenville. It identifies, similar to our provincial policy statement, that the urban settlement areas are primary centers for growth, development, and urban activities, including residential development. And these areas shall be the focus of growth and accommodate a broad range of uses. Urban settlement areas in the county will provide a mix of housing types, including affordable housing options, and will be designed to be walkable communities with consideration for opportunities for future public transit. And the county official plan also encourages local municipalities to focus the development of affordable housing within our urban settlement areas, which provide the greatest opportunity for a range of housing forms, types, and tenures. Next slide, please. Our own official plan provides planning guidance for development throughout the municipality of North Grenville. As per section 10.2.2, we are to establishes the objective for the support and provision of a choice of dwelling type according to location, size, affordability, tenure, design, accessibility to provide a broad range of housing requirements. So we're encouraging all different types and forms of density within our urban area. We also encourage infill and residential development and intensification where existing land uses are not adversely affected and where existing services can be effectively utilized. Next slide, please. The municipality has a variety of affordable housing policies that we must speak to. Section 11 of the official plan provides our policies for housing development across North Grenville, and consistent with the PPS, the municipal official plan supports the development of affordable housing to meet the economic, social, health, and well-being requirements of all people. And the municipality shall attempt to have a target of 25% of all new residential construction affordable. In a given year, the residential development may meet, exceed, or fall short of the 25% and is therefore averaged over a 3-year period. So it's an older policy. I'd like to note that this application came in before our policy change. So we have to refer to the policies that were in place at the time that we received the application. But if we go to the next slide. I note that the developer has brought forward a proposal to include 6 accessory apartments or additional residential units within development as part of addressing the affordable housing policy goals of the municipality. So this composition of the accessory units represents approximately 12% of the total units of being rental units, and it's being incorporated into the zoning bylaw amendment itself. Further, the townhouse building typology, which is strongly encouraged within the municipality's housing strategies, is incorporated into 100% of the proposed development. So we are getting a medium density form of development, which provides a different market type of housing available to the residents of North Grenville or incoming residents to North Grenville, beyond just typically what we've seen as the single detached dwelling type of development. So the variety of housing options with respect to bedroom counts within the proposed units provides an opportunity for opportunities to house throughout all stages of life and circumstances, whether it's someone trying to get into the housing market or a couple trying to downsize, coming into from their existing home into a smaller unit. Next slide, please. So the proposed amendment has many proposed changes to what is currently permitted within the R3 zone. So a minimum lot area of 125 meters squared. The minimum lot frontage is proposed at 5 meters with minimum front yard setbacks of 4 meters. And again, with some special provisions in regards to setbacks from an enclosed porch. So typically in our zoning bylaw, we do allow for a little bit of a shorter setback from the front yard for a porch. Looking at a minimum exterior side yard of 1.5 meters, a minimum side yard setback of 1.5 meters or none, where you have the townhouse units are obviously sharing, the property line is the shared wall. A minimum rear yard setback of 5 meters, a minimum dwelling unit area, it would maintain at 46 square meters. And then building height would slightly increase by 0.5 meters. And then the maximum lot coverage that's proposed right now is that we require 40%, but they're around 22.53%. Next slide, please. Special provisions are also being built into the zoning bylaw. And again, recognizing that maximum density of 125 square meters of lot area that would permit the 50 townhouse units. As recognizing that the steps may project into the required front or exterior side yard, but in no instance shall the front yard be reduced below 1.2 meters. Total of all buildings and structures for is 35% lot coverage. The landscape open space would be 35% minimum. There's 21 parking spaces for visitor parking. And again, that minimum accessory dwelling unit requirement, it will be captured within the zoning bylaw amendment at 6 dwelling units. Accessory structures may be located within 2 meters of any required setback, and then a maximum of 6 visitor parkings may be considered through the condominium for uses related to the additional residential units. So the other item that is important to note is that this is just the first step with the zoning amendment. There will be a subsequent plan of condominium and plan of subdivision coming forward on these lands. So certainly this is not the last step of the process. We're just at the beginning. So there's more work to be done and to address, and I'll get to public comment shortly, some of the concerns that have been raised by members of the public. Next slide, please. So we did receive comment from the Rideau Valley Conservation Authority and the Health Unit, and they didn't have any objections to the proposed development. I note that because it's in the urban area, the Health Unit typically doesn't have review. They are Part 8 septic review, so they wouldn't have had anything to review as part of this file. And Rideau Valley Conservation is involved and will be continue to be involved as we go through the plan of subdivision process. So they're certainly involved in that part. After the presentation and the report was published, we had received some comments from members of the public, some who are in attendance tonight. And I'm going to do my best to summarize those comments. There were 5 themes that emerged from the 3 letters that were received by the municipality, and those letters have been circulated to members of council as well as to the developer, and a response has been provided back via staff to address some of those things that have been raised. One of the items that was raised is in regard to butternut trees that are on the property. There are butternuts. A species at risk assessment was undertaken as part of the application process, which identified that the trees are infected with butternut canker. As to such, they are not eligible for protection under the Act, and this has been sent to the ministry and has been approved. The other question that came up was in regards to green space, and as I noted, there is amenity space that's being provided on site in the form of some open grassed areas, as well as a playground located closer to the rail trail. Traffic was another significant concern that was raised, and this is an item that I have had very high level discussions at this point with our Director of Public Works, and further discussion is warranted with United Counties, as Van Buren is a county road. So we certainly be looking at how do we address some of the residents' concerns in regards to matters such as traffic calming, and just access onto the road, given that we're going to be adding 50 additional units to Van Buren Street. I also note that a traffic impact study is a requirement as part of the plan of subdivision, and that will be reviewed in-depthly at that point, and recommendations could come forth as part of the draft plan conditions that would the municipality would issue as part of that process. Another concern that was raised by 3 individuals who share a property line with where Garbage Room 1 is proposed to be located was the concern over just having that building located so close to their property line, the potential for vermin, for pests, for garbage to overflow out. And this was a matter that was raised with the planner on file, Mr. Demchak, and he noted that they have provided this information and the concerns raised by the residents through myself, and their architect will be looking at alternative locations for that structure. It was noted that the utility room, which is part of that area where that garbage room is to be located, would still remain. But I do not believe, and the residents can certainly speak up for themselves this evening if I'm incorrect, that the utility room is much of an issue. It was more the fact that they were having a garbage room or garbage storage building located within close proximity to their property. And finally, the other item that was raised was stormwater management, just the concern of drainage on the property. And I assure council and members of the public that as part of our process, we require a stormwater management plan, a grading and drainage plan, So these things are well thought out as to how we manage runoff when we're increasing density on the property and impervious surfaces, and both the Conservation Authority and the municipality have a role in reviewing those documentation. Next slide, please. So it's at this time that staff recommend to council that you support zoning bylaw 20-21 to rezone the lands at 210 Van Buren from industrial to residential third density, exception 24, to support the development of the 50 townhouse dwelling units as presented this evening. And that ends my formal presentation. I'm not certain, Madam Mayor, if you'd like to hear a presentation from Mr. Demchak, because it may answer some questions from council. And then we could do a round of questions after Mr. Demchak's presentation is done. That could be directed at either myself or Mr. Demchak.
Before we go to Mr. Demchak, is there any pressing question at this point for Ms. Martin? Okay. So if there's a member of the public who wishes to speak now, so we can certainly recognize Katie Nolan. Go ahead, Ms. Nolan.
I was just hoping to get some clarification on what would be included in the utility room. So perhaps when Mr. Demchak presents, he can cover that.
Okay, sounds good. Any other questions from members of the public? Okay, so then we'll have Mr. Demchak present, and then we'll go to questions from members of council and members of our community who are here this evening.
Good evening, members of council. Can everyone hear me okay? Okay, great.
Yes.
Thank you for sharing the presentation. Makes it a little easier for me to navigate this evening. So my name is Paul Demchak with Patori Management. I'm the planning consultant on behalf of the applicant for 210 Van Buren Street in Kemptville. Next slide, please. I'll try to be brief, recognizing that Ms. Martin did a pretty thorough presentation, but obviously Ms. Martin has indicated where the subject property is located. As mentioned, we are proposing 50 townhouse units. I do have additional information in further slides, but obviously just for context purposes, there is a single access coming off of Van Buren Street into the site, and obviously a number of internal private roads that are proposed and will be further delineated through a future plan of subdivision and plan of condominium. Next slide, please. Here's just some existing site photos. As it's already been noted, the site is currently vacant, and we are looking at obviously intensifying the subject site with residential townhomes. Next slide, please. So in terms of the county official plan, I will note that the subject lands are located within the existing built boundary and are designated urban settlement area. Residential development is permitted within the urban boundary, and the county official plan directs growth to the existing urban settlement areas. Next slide, please. So as it's been noted, the North Grenville official plan does designate the site as residential. The maximum permitted density, there is bonusing provisions, but the maximum permitted density within the official plan is 45 units per gross hectare. And I will note that the subject development proposes a density of 29 units per hectare. And in my opinion, obviously the subject application largely conforms to the policies within the North Grenville official plan. Next slide, please. What's most unique about the site is obviously the existing zoning. And the in-force zoning bylaw does designate the site as an M zone, which is industrial. The industrial zone does not permit residential uses, with the exception obviously of an accessory dwelling unit for a caretaker or a security guard. And as such, the zoning amendment application that's before council tonight is required to facilitate the proposed townhouse uses. I will note, obviously, that the R3 zoning category that is proposed does facilitate the townhouse development with site-specific provisions for setbacks and some of the other built form parameters, as was noted. One critical thing I would like to note, just for the benefit of council and obviously the public, is that the industrial M zone does currently permit a range of uses on the property. This includes, for example, an automotive shop, service station, car wash, truck repair, and outdoor storage uses, among others. And I will note that it is the existing setbacks and built form provisions within this M zone do permit setbacks, including a 3-meter minimum rear side yard setback, as well as a maximum building height of 13 meters. And respectfully, in my opinion, this potentially would have a greater massing impact than what I'll further explain in terms of what we're proposing as residential townhomes contemplated for the subject property. And I would suggest that given this opportunity that exists for redevelopment of the site and bringing it into compliance with the policies of the North Grenville official plan, I do think we have an opportunity to essentially align the permissions of the subject site to meet that planning framework and vision. Next slide, please. So this is a little bit zoomed in version of the site plan. And again, I apologize. It's always hard to view these images on a screen, but I will try to narrate this a little bit as best as possible. So the proposed development is comprised of 7 townhouse blocks being integrated into a private road system. There are a total of 50 townhouse units ranging from 2 to 3 stories in height and have floor areas that range from approximately 1,800 square feet to 2,300 square feet. I will note that the townhouse units that are located on the bottom of the screen, which are adjacent to the rear yards that front onto Joseph Street, those units are proposed at 2 stories, whereas the balance of the units that are further away from some of those residential uses are 3 stories in height. So what we're trying to do is essentially accomplish a transition in building heights and massing away from some of the lower density single story residential uses that are on Joseph Street. So the massing and density of is, in my opinion, is consistent with the intensification policy of the official plan. And again, I will note that all units are oriented towards the private roads with walk-up entrances and private garages. The newly created private road and landscape and amenity areas proposed within the development are intended to create a pedestrian-oriented environment. The proposed development is intended to improve some of the public realm, including future connections and sidewalk connections to Van Buren Street, which is the most significant, as well as to the existing rail trail with 1 connection proposed. Right beside that connection is where essentially the amenity space is proposed, which includes parkette features and open landscape space. And that is obviously intended for the benefit of users and residential homeowners within this future development, and also just members of the public that perhaps seek to ride along the rail trail and enter into the site. Next slide, please. Actually, sorry, my apologies. I would like to go up because I know there was some comments from the public that I would like to just briefly highlight. So there was a comment about, maybe most importantly, about the garbage room location. So we do have 2 garbage rooms that are proposed just in terms of ease of access for potential homeowners within the development. Noting that there is some concerns about the location of the garbage room, we will take that back with our architect team, and through the future plan of subdivision, we'll try to either integrate it or further mitigate potential impacts in terms of its location. I will note that this garbage room is located, the one that's perhaps in question, is located at the rear of some of the homes that are adjacent to the site along Van Buren. That garbage room is also tied in with a utility room, which is only for the purposes of a water meter room. So there's no noise that emits from that water meter room, but it's essentially for the benefit of obviously the condominium owners. There is obviously separate potential gas meters and hydro meters, but those are located individually on each townhouse unit. So only the water meter room is attached to that proposed garbage room. Next slide, please. Just in terms of affordability, I know it was mentioned that we are proposing 6 accessory apartments. So these are located on some of the end units along the western blocks of the development. And what we have included is these 6 accessory apartments that comprise a total of 12% of units within the development, and will be allocated for obviously future rental units, or essentially like aging in place units. Next slide, please. I do have a couple of renderings that I would like to share just for everyone's benefit this evening. So this is a rendering of the 2-story townhouse units that front along the western edge of the townhouse development. Next slide, please. And this is an image of the 3-story townhouse units that are more internal to the site. Next slide, please.
Sorry, could I just stop you in terms of that first visual? Because many of us are familiar with this sort of this area. It's right next to the rail trail. So, and there's a good vantage point from Van Buren. So this shot here, what's the orientation? So at what angle would you have to be looking into the subdivision to see this particular presentation of both obviously lawn, green space, and semi-detached housing?
Sure. So I'll try to my best to articulate it. So if I'm driving south into the site, and this would be on, essentially, if I'm going into the site from the south, this would be on the right-hand side of the proposed subdivision. And that would be the units that front onto that right-hand side when I would be driving in. If you were to, for example, turn around and look to the left, that would be where you would see the 3-story units.
Okay. And then in terms of because you feature a lovely green lawn, it looks very spacious. What is the setback between those existing Van Buren properties, which are also sort of featured on your site map, and these homes? So what is the setback in that instance? Just because I see the picture and it's helping me to visualize, and I just want to break it down. So what do we see there?
No, I appreciate the questions. Thank you. So essentially, we have a number of setback provisions as the units and specifically these units that are the 2-story units. We are proposing a 7.5 meter rear yard setback condition from the existing single detached houses on that back onto Joseph. And then adjacent to that, actually, if you don't mind, could we go up to the site plan slide? Thank you. That's perfect. So what you see here is from the houses that back onto Van Buren, you have a condition where we have a landscape buffer, we have obviously a meter room, we have a roadway connection, and then we have another, I'll call it very smaller landscape buffer and exterior side yard setback, and then some of the townhouse units. I don't know the exact measurement, but if I were to estimate, that would be well over 12 meters in distance from where the rear yards of some of those houses on Van Buren are.
Okay, thank you. You can carry on.
Thank you, Mayor Peckford. So in brief, obviously this evening an application is before council to amend the zoning bylaw to permit the townhomes and the specific development criteria associated with that zoning bylaw. As Ms. Martin had noted, a plan of subdivision and future plan of condominium applications are also required subsequent to this application for zoning bylaw. So we do have a lot of work left to go and a lot of, frankly, technical details to sort out prior to obviously future construction of the development. And this is the first stage of that. But I do want to just briefly summarize from my perspective. And as noted, I think this is an opportunity to bring the zoning bylaw into conformance with some of those upper tier policy documents, including the official plan. And from an urban design perspective, I do think that the development will fit within and improve the existing built form context. And it's in keeping with obviously the intent of the official plan and does consider the policies of the affordable housing strategy goals of the municipality. I'm before council this evening and would be happy to answer any further questions. Thank you.
Okay, council, two very fulsome presentations. just two quick questions off the top, and then if you could just raise your hands, I'll acknowledge you. When was the property zoned residential through our official plan process? And Ms. Martin, I don't think you were with us at the time. I'm just curious to know when we decided to deem this property, though its existing zoning is industrial. I think there was a future look at some of the properties that were in this category of zoning, and there was some thought or consideration to the residential zoning. I'm just curious if you have that history. And then just quickly, I'm just curious about the affordable housing piece. We know, as I'm sure Mr. Demchak, you're aware, the property is quite expensive here. Residential homes are selling in some cases for over $1 million. And as great as it is to have some of the semi-detached housing, the accessibility of that housing, I think, is arguable. We'll see what the market would bear in the years ahead. But so I'm just curious about that 12%. I know that, the addition of secondary units can be quite valuable in terms of increasing rental stock, which is important. You talked about seniors aging in place, or housing a young family, or adult children who can't make their way out quite yet. So I found the number 6 fairly low when we are aiming for closer to 25% versus 12. I understand some of the other considerations, but certainly that's a quick reflection. Council colleagues, do you have other questions? I have some, but I'll reserve them for the end if you do not. Okay. So perhaps, Ms. Martin, you could speak to housing and the official plan, and then I'll recognize Councillor Barclay and Councillor Strachan.
Thank you, Your Worship. In regards to the timeline on the zoning and on the official plan, without going back and reviewing the preceding zoning for the town of Kemptville and our previous official plans, I'll speak to the timelines of when our current documents came into effect. So the zoning bylaw has been in effect since 2012, being the comprehensive zoning bylaw. So certainly for 10 years that properties held that industrial zoning. Our official plan that we currently work with came into effect in 2018. So it's quite a bit later than the zoning. Typically what you see is when you do update your official plan, within 2 years, you update your zoning schedules to reflect the planning schedules, but certainly I don't believe that's happened. And I also wouldn't know or have the history on why those lands have stayed industrial. But it's something that I can follow up on with yourself afterwards. But it would require me to go through some of our past documentation to understand how that's evolved. And then perhaps, Your Worship, maybe I'll turn it over to Mr. Demchak to speak to the affordable housing piece in regards to the 12%.
But if I might, Ms. Martin, just very quickly, on the official plan, so 2018 official plan basically deems these lands residential, correct? Is that what I heard?
That's correct, Your Worship. And I mean, from a logical standpoint, when you're looking at the boundaries of the residential zone, the rail trail actually makes a really good divisive line between the industrial lands to the east and to the residential area that is located on the west side. I'll also note that the lands adjacent are designated industrial under our official plan, and certainly our official plan does recognize that where feasible, that these lands can be converted to residential uses. Not saying that those policies apply, but just kind of speaking to the evolution of the conversion of industrial lands over time. Now, I'm not aware, certainly that, as to past industrial uses on this property, we have processes in which they have to go through in regards to environmental assessments. But certainly, it could have been a decision without having seen the previous official plan, just to align the residential designation with everything on the west side of the rail trail.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Demchak, just in terms of that affordable housing component.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Peckford. So for the affordable housing component, obviously I can't speak to every residential development that perhaps the county is currently reviewing and looking at. In terms of affordability and the typology that is proposed. So for example, there may be some other developers that are proposing single detached houses. What we had essentially suggested, and as part of our initial applications, we are looking at obviously a more, I would say, compact and urban built form, being townhomes, which is frankly more affordable than a typical detached house, typically in the marketplace. Secondly, the 6 units that we are proposing, we felt that those were appropriate just in terms of their location. So they are within some of the larger townhouse units that are proposed in terms of their design. And there was just more flexibility for having them located along the end units. I will also note that the zoning bylaw, the way that it's been written in draft form, it stipulates that that is the minimum number. And there would be potential flexibility if we wanted to add additional ones through the plan of subdivision process to, for example, additional end units on some of the blocks, that we have the flexibility to do that. I know I've had some of those frank discussions with Ms. Martin, and we would be willing to at least consider that as we move forward with the plan of subdivision and plan of condominium processes.
Okay, thank you. I'll recognize Councillor Barclay and then Councillor Strachan. Councillor Barclay, you're muted. Just that.
That's the second
okay.
time. I've been so good lately. Yeah, I've got a number of questions trying to unpack of what's proposed. But simply, I guess some of these questions I have, I'll direct to Ms. Martin, and then maybe Mr. Demchuk would like to fill in afterwards. We've dealt with the affordable housing percentage, and we recognize that what you're proposing is 12%, and thank you for just recently mentioning that you do have some flexibility. So personally, I'd like to see that increase the number of end units. From what I understand, you have more end units, which would facilitate those accessory apartments. My questions are to the housing mix and the amenity space. So Ms. Martin, the amenity space, so overall, there's 35% open space in this development, and is that a minimum? And you know what I'm trying to get to is there sufficient parkland or amenity space in this development, or are we looking at a minimum that's been being presented?
So the minimum based on the zoning amendment is 35%. I do want to recognize the fact that each unit will have their own private amenity space as part of each unit that is demonstrated on the plan. So they each have their own rear yards. So that certainly does account for, now I can't say it accounts for parkland space, but it accounts for that amenity space calculation that we do. And then I haven't run the math on the overall, just the parkland and extra additional amenity space that's being created, but certainly that would be considered as part of the plan of subdivision, as there are provisions for, taking of land versus that 5% cash in the parkland. So we'll be working with the developers as we move forward as to how that unfolds through the more technical side with the plan of subdivision, but certainly that provision of the more there's open grassed areas and the playground itself provides more options to the residents within the community.
And I do appreciate that it's next to the rail trail, and certainly it gives the impression of a lot more open space than what the actual property offers. And I do appreciate that this plan came to us at or before our policy change, and I would expect that the developer has been introduced to the idea of our design guidelines that we're proposing. My other question is to the housing mix, a desire for us to have a housing mix. And I note that all 50 of these proposed dwellings are townhomes. So I wonder if there's any opportunity to, maybe have a mix of housing. Mr. Demchuk spoke to a transition, and that referred to the height going from 2 stories to 3 stories, which I appreciate. I think that's being sensitive to the fact that they're abutting against single family homes, but I wondered if there's any flexibility or in terms of the kinds of houses being built. Because my understanding is that we're looking for a mix in each development, a mix of housing and housing types, but maybe maybe that's not enshrined in our policy. So the question is to you, Ms. Martin, and then maybe Mr. Demchuk can weigh in. Thank you.
Certainly, Councillor Barclay. So we do encourage a mix of housing types. The official plan does include targets for development overall, but certainly our infill and residential intensification policies are at play here with this development. So as much as they are sticking with one residential type, being the townhouse development. They're providing, a level of density that provides, more housing on the property and more housing options than if they were to provide a mix, including single attached dwellings or even semi-detached, which would reduce the number of units that they could get on the property. So certainly, from a policy perspective, it's more medium density type of residential development, but our policy speaks to, overall percentages when it comes to housing type. So this would provide maybe a little more balance for some developments that might be a lot lower in density.
Okay.
Councillor Barkley, you're done?
No.
We'll move on.
Well, for now.
Okay. I'll go to, I'm sorry, Councillor Strachan. She's off my screen. And then anyone else who's raising their hands.
Thank you, Mayor Peckford. And thank you, Ms. Martin and Mr. Demchuk for your presentations. I think there are a few comments. Some of them have come from residents, but how I echo them as well. The rental units is, I think, are an important addition to this equation. I think that it does offer some different options for housing that would be more affordable simply because they are smaller units. And I recognize that townhomes are also more affordable than single detached homes. I don't know that equates, and that's not a problem that you have, but it's a problem I think that I'm wrestling with, that it equates with affordable housing. It's just housing that's more affordable than if you had something that was bigger on a bigger lot and so on. But I do recognize that those options are good. And I think the use of infill housing, we've had this discussion before, it does allow for other options, walkability and all that kind of thing to access the town core as well. So those are perhaps the positive comments that I have. I'm a bit concerned about the reduced setbacks. In all cases, they're reduced, which speaks to the densification. I would think that if we reduce setbacks, then you can fit more housing in there. These houses presumably are for families, small families who would live there, and so we're putting a lot of people into a very small area. 50 homes in there is quite significant. And with all those reduced setbacks, you have a lot of people sort of living in very close quarters, which can cause other problems down the line. And I recognize that there are garages, and typically you would expect people to put cars in their garages. However, I can speak from experience in town here, garages typically aren't used for vehicles. They're used as extra storage space in a lot of cases. So that would mean there would be one parking space effectively for each of the houses. And we don't have any enforcement tools in place right now that would include that parking spot in the garage to be used only for a vehicle. So I think that there's a potential for parking issues within that neighborhood as well, similar to what we see in our more dense urban part of Kemptville as well. The traffic, I think, is a real concern. I'm trying to imagine a number of cars leaving there all at the same time and exiting onto that part of Van Buren. I think it would be challenging. Van Buren is a busy spot to begin with. Notwithstanding the reduced speed limit, it does mean that there's a lot of vehicle traffic there. And so I think that part would need to be considered from the municipal perspective as well. And I don't know, I haven't seen anything that says that we've done any sort of extensive traffic study on this one, but perhaps I could be corrected on that one. The number of rental units, as Councillor Barkley mentioned, I think increasing those, if you have the capacity to do so, would help offer some more options as well on that more affordable housing options that we would have available. So I would like to see those numbers increase if that is consideration that you would like to bring up. The garbage, where the garbage units are located, I think is also problematic. Like many towns that have lots of people living close together and all that, there have been issues with rats and vermin and so on in the core. So, making sure that those are secure, not with, and also to the point that, there are houses that are in the immediate area and you wouldn't want to have the smell of garbage wafting into your home either. So I don't know if how that can be either changed for the location to reduce that problem, mitigate that issue, or to ensure that there's a secure, building that would help hopefully try and prevent that those kinds of things from happening. Just doing a quick scan of my notes right now. I think those are the main points that I wanted to bring up. So I think that overall this is a good use of space. I think there are some concerns about some of these the number of houses in that space and what that could mean for parking and traffic and just overall space that people have to live in. That those are the ones that come to mind. Thank you.
Thanks, Councilor Strachan. Is it Ms. Martin? Before I go, I see Mr. Yakimovich, Francois Sarrazin, as well as Katie Nolan. I think all of whom are members of the public. So before I go there, is there any quick comment you or Mr. Demchak wishes to make at this time?
It's thank you, Your Worship. But just to reiterate the fact that there's still more process left to go through that plan of subdivision, that plan of condominium, and certainly the comments that are being heard tonight will be reviewed and looked at with the developer and their agents as we move forward through that process. And certainly the counties will be a part of that conversation, given that Van Buren is a county road. And as mentioned, I've already engaged the Director of Public Works as part of that discussion, as certain elements would fall within the realm of the municipality in regards to things like sidewalks. So certainly it's something that we are hearing the feedback, and we'll be providing some follow-up and part of that due diligence process through the plan of subdivision.
Okay. Okay, so then I'll go to Mr. Yakimovich. Welcome, Sean.
Thank you, Mayor Peckford. Question perhaps for Ms. Martin or Mr. Demchuk is just regarding lighting of the street. I don't know if it's too early in the process to discuss that, if that's in the plan yet, but just, will the streets be lit all night long? Will it be on motion sensors, that kind of thing? Can you comment on that detail?
Ms. Martin or Mr. Demchak, please.
I'll refer to Mr. Demchak, and should council like, I could address maybe some of our policies in regard to lighting.
Mr. Demchak.
Sure. So thank you for the question, Sean. So for you, Mayor Peckford, the lighting details and timing and everything has not been fleshed out in terms of the specific details. However, I will note that similar to other townhouse projects, almost identical, frankly, to this, we always ensure that we're designing the project with essentially full cutoff lighting. So we're not emitting essentially light pollution or light standards into neighboring rear yard properties or to on adjacent properties. I'll be candid, I haven't reviewed the municipality's details or standards in full detail, but that's the intent. And we make sure that we do that appropriately. And we'll submit a future detailed lighting and photometric plan to make sure those details are captured.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Ms. Martin, is there anything else you want to say on lighting before we move on?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. So we do have engineering standards, and it's certainly a requirement. We do require photometric plans to be provided as part of that plan of subdivision process. So that will be incorporated, and we do try to mitigate as much as we can light spillage, especially onto neighboring properties.
Thank you.
Mr. Yakimovich, you're good? Nothing else?
Yep, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll recognize Francois Sarrazin and then Ms. Katie Nolan.
Hello, everybody hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hi there. I have a few questions. I guess many of them will be going to Mr. Demchak. First of all, for where the properties meet adjoining properties, is there a plan for any fencing, either privacy fencing or even just chain link fencing? Should I go through all my questions or should I?
Yes, why don't you just give them all to us?
Perfect. And I noticed in the presentation, which was very thorough, thank you, there's lots of setback adjustments to allow for this density. From what I understood from what Mr. Demchak was saying was that per hectare, this is still below the amount of, I guess, units per hectare. But it seems like there's going to be very small lawns. There's going to be lots of people very close to each other. I understand that we want to allow a mixed density usage, but it seems like it's gonna, like most of the houses in that area are just single family homes with fairly decent sized lots, and then there'll be these people that are just squished together in comparison. And so I'm not sure about, are those necessary? Is there not another way of doing this? Is this a question of maximizing as many units to maximize profits, which, I guess is always a consideration. There's also the question of those accessory housing units that are supposed to be the affordable housing part. I'm not sure if I fully understood. Are these basically what we would call granny suites or in-law suites? Because if so, I'm not really sure if those are affordable housing, if they're basically reserved for people who live in this house originally or family members. I'm wondering if there might not be some other way that we could accommodate more affordable housing, because people are being priced out of Kemptville. And if we're going to be taking this wild place and changing it into a new housing subdivision, it would be nice if we made room for those people who want to stay in Kemptville but are being priced out of it. And Mr. Demchak mentioned that there would be sidewalk connections that would be planned. I'm just not sure what would be connecting to, because there is no sidewalk on that side of the street. It's a bit of a problem already. People are walking in front of people's yards because there's only sidewalk on the north side of Van Buren and not on the south side. I fully support the idea of sidewalk connections. I think it's a great idea. But I'm not sure how realistic that is, with what's actually in place there. And finally, there was some sort of mention about a sanitary easement. I'd just like some more information about that. I'm not sure what that means. Sorry, I'm new to this whole process. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll go to Ms. Martin or Mr. Demchak, and then we'll see if all your questions were answered. Thank you. Ms. Martin, do you want to start?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll defer a majority of the questions to Mr. Demchak as appropriate. I think the one question I can answer is in regards to the sanitary easement. So the municipality has a sanitary line that runs through this property as defined by an easement. So we do have infrastructure in the ground. The easement does protect it and does give us rights to access it should we need for repairs. So through that end, the development had to take that into consideration because it's located on their property. So essentially, the simplest explanation is that we've got a sanitary line on the property, and it's been identified.
Okay. And Ms. Martin, could you just speak to the affordable housing? Because I understand that should affordable units be built, should things proceed here, that those would be fully independent potential rental units that would be available to the community, not just those living in those dwellings. Is that your understanding? Or maybe Mr. Demchak can speak to that.
I'll just have Mr. Demchak confirm those details.
Mr. Demchak?
Thank you, Mayor Peckford. So I'll try to do my best to go through each line item as I wrote them down. So I'll start with the fencing details. So it is intended that we would like to improve some of those, I'll call it rear yard conditions for some of the existing residential units with new board-on-board fencing for each of the units. And obviously that would be the cost of the developer. In terms of the setback adjustments, so I will note that the setbacks that for the rear yards of the townhomes that back onto Joseph Street, those are compliant with the zoning bylaw requirements of a 7.5 meter rear yard setback. And it's only deficient for some of the rear yard setbacks on those internal units that are further inside the site and don't abut the existing residential units. So I recognize that some of them are deficient, but it's not by and large the entire development. It's only certain blocks and certain pinch points of the project. Regarding sidewalk connections, obviously we're trying to improve conditions within the site and connectivity to the larger community, recognizing that you're correct. We don't have a full sidewalk. There's essentially like a curb condition with almost like an asphalt walkway at the side on the south side of Van Buren. But it's something that we'd have to still work through as part of the future plan of subdivision in terms of what's acceptable to the municipality and what those details specifically look like. And finally, just in terms of the accessory apartments and the affordable housing, I guess from my perspective, obviously those units, there's an option. Like we're letting essentially the future potential owners decide how they want to treat those units, whether they want to rent them out, whether it wants to be, for example, a mother, a father, a sister, brother that wants to live there in terms of just aging in place, as was discussed. It's not being regulated by any other body from my perspective.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Demchuk. And we'll go to Ms. Katie Nolan and recognize Mr. Saracen's beautiful baby. So thank you. I'm glad you got all your questions in. We can come back to you for part. Ms. Nolan, go ahead.
Thanks, Mayor Peckford, and thanks everyone for the great discussion. I'm really learning a lot, and this is a great opportunity to learn a bit more about this project. I just wanted to provide some context as someone who lives right here and experiences this area every day. So I have a couple of comments and a couple of questions. First, I'd like to talk a little bit about the topic of green space. I know that's been raised by several people. The question that I had, Mr. Demchuk, about your renderings, and if it's possible, if we could have on the screen the renderings of the 3-story units again. That just went by pretty fast. I didn't really get a chance to look at it very well. But I just noticed that in both of the renderings, there are a fair number of trees pictured. I just wonder if those are real trees that are part of the plan or if they're just for the rendering. And related to that, whether the strip of trees along the rail trail will remain or will it be cut down for the development? And just as a comment around that, you know, we've certainly found that in our home, we are able to heat and cool our home very efficiently, largely because we do have some great trees around us. And certainly, you know, that's something that when we talk about green space, you know, like a flat lawn area and a parquet are great for kids, but I really would like to see trees for the benefit of ourselves and of course the new residents. So if we can speak to that a little bit, that would be great. With regard to traffic safety, and I know this is more direct, but I just want to make it clear that from my perspective as a local resident, the infrastructure between Prescott Street and Highway 19 Rideau River Road is already insufficient to provide a safe environment for existing residents. So I want to give you a couple of examples just so you understand what we experience in this area. So there's a community living North Grenville site right beside our home. Many of the residents use wheelchairs, and their caregivers often you know, take them out for walks along Joseph Street or along the rail trail. And to access those points, they are pushing wheelchairs on Van Buren Street in traffic. Our kids have learned to ride bikes, you know, navigating that same terrain. Our kids walk home from the high school, from the schools on the campus. I myself was a pedestrian to and from the campus for many years and had to dash down this strip of Van Buren from Joseph Street to my residence, avoiding traffic during peak time. So it's a real problem. And in terms of sidewalk connectivity, I think that really needs to be considered. The speed limit is 40. It is almost never observed. People go down this road at 80 or higher speeds. I haven't seen any monitoring on the street for ages, much less enforcement. So this is a residential area and it is really used as a thoroughfare. And I would be really concerned about greater safety hazards with an additional, you know, 130 cars or however many, you know, residents, new families joining us here on Van Buren Street. So those were some things that I wanted to share.
So maybe, Mr. Demchuk, you can speak to trees and greenery, and then we'll have Ms. Martin speak to traffic more generally. And if there's something else in there that you would like to respond to in terms of Ms. Nolan, feel free. So Mr. Demchuk.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor Peckford. So I'll start with the green space, and I'll say maybe start with the renderings. So those renderings are, just to be candid, they're pretty pictures. They're not completely accurate description of what, you know, is there at the moment, or obviously what is it potentially intended. Some of those details are still to come to fruition. So you made a very good comment regarding future trees within the site and how that could be improved. As part of the plan of subdivision, we're going to be required to go through a detailed landscaping plan and to make sure that we accommodate ideally as many trees as possible in front yards of proposed dwellings and potentially throughout the site to better improve just landscaping opportunities and canopy coverage. There was also a comment I heard regarding trees adjacent to the rail trail and whether those will be cut or removed. So adjacent to the rail trail, we do have that sanitary easement, and there are no proposed, obviously, townhomes or structures adjacent to that. From my perspective, that would negatively impact those trees. So no, we won't be removing those as part of the development.
Okay. Thank you. Ms. Martin, we've had this discussion prior to this meeting on sidewalks. I think council concurs that Van Buren's pedestrian infrastructure, road safety infrastructure is insufficient. It also turns out to be a truck route. So you can imagine the existing challenges with a lack of pedestrian infrastructure. And it's great to promote these interior developments where there's walkability within the development, but I would agree wholeheartedly with Ms. Nolan's comments. And I was asking Ms. Martin before the meeting if there were any foreseeable commitments to building out pedestrian infrastructure when it came to Van Buren. And Ms. Martin, I don't know if you have anything to add at this stage.
Thank you, Your Worship. So what I can say is that from a development perspective, in regards to the site itself, a traffic impact study will be required. I have raised this matter just through the comments that we've received as part of this process with our Director of Public Works. And again, just it is a county road, so there's some partnership that has to happen between those two levels of government to take a look at this. I do know that there is a PXO crossing being installed. I want to say at the end of this month or next month at the rail trail on Van Buren. But I do realize that just facilitates the crossing of the road, not necessarily not necessarily a sidewalk on the south side. Sorry, Francois, your comment of PXO is it's those controlled crossings that you see with the flashing lights, and it would be a marked intersection. So not intersection, but a marked crossing. So we have one across from the municipal center, and I think there's one down by the hospital as well that you can signalize. It just provides a safer area to cross. But certainly, the planning department has heard these concerns and will be addressing them with Public Works as things move forward to see what we can do. And certainly one of the items that have been raised through the comments received from members of the public in attendance tonight has been about traffic calming measures. And again, as it's a county road, we'll be looking to them as part of that discussion. So certainly it's not something that is going to go away. But as we start to see more developments, more consideration is going to have to occur around some of our major roads. Van Buren, we're getting close to Prescott Street and that entrance into the downtown. Concerns have been heard, and I am taking this back internally for follow-up and for further discussion.
Yes, certainly. Amy, in my understanding, of course, because we're spending a lot of money on multi-use pathways on County Road 43, is that it is our responsibility as a municipality to invest in those sidewalks. And while I would presume that we would get that kind of permission from the counties to install the sidewalks. It really is at our discretion. And unfortunately, I don't believe that Van Buren has appeared on any priority list that I've seen. So again, when we contemplate these things, I do think it's important to reconcile some of those competing priorities and where things may move up or down. Ultimately, as I've heard the discussion, and I'll give our council colleagues and any member of the public a last opportunity to speak. I think we're looking at compatibility in terms of single dwellings, right, with largish backyards, right, that more or less have been looking into a field. Obviously the proposal this evening is to convert that into fairly dense housing, more or less. And how do you ease that transition? And I think some of the sensitivities, Mr. Demchuk, that you're trying to accommodate into sort of phasing the density and the heights, and some of the, green space that's built in to each of those private dwellings, or as part of the overall presentation aesthetic of the neighborhoods. But it's a stark difference, right? We've had some other infill developments in North Grenville or in the town of Kemptville, certainly, but perhaps none quite like this. So I think council is wanting to pay very close attention to some of the minor details that could make all the difference for some of those existing residents, and also just sort of increase the quality of life of those who may be potentially moving in to a subdivision like this moving forward. So I'm going to recognize Mr. Sarrazin again and his beautiful baby, and then I'll go over to Councillor Barkley. Mr. Sarrazin? Oh, and you are not, you're muted.
We're good now? Yeah.
Yes.
Perfect. Just while we're talking about traffic, I had written in my written submissions, sort of a supplementary concern I have. People often use Joseph and then Fenton, or Ferguson and then Fenton, to go around the intersection at the end of Van Buren and Prescott. These are very residential streets, and people don't pay any attention to the stop signs where they meet Fenton, because there's never any cops. And I can also tell you that I've seen many public works vehicles just go through these stop signs and snowplows over the course of many years. And I'm concerned that if we add on these extra residents, we're going to just worsen this problem. And so on top of Van Buren Street, the streets that connect to Van Buren Street that lead to county roads on the way out of Kemptville also need to be examined to make sure that people aren't using these as shortcuts and putting people at risk, because these streets are not designed for that kind of traffic. That's all I want to say. Thank you very much. And Florence says good night.
Bonne nuit. Councillor Barkley, please.
Yeah, I'm unmuted now. Just a quick comment regarding sidewalk priority list. I imagine if this rezoning occurs and the development gets approved, that certainly Van Buren, with the help of Madam Mayor at council table, county's council table, that it would appear on a priorities list, because I think I think the development will endeavor to make connectivity within the development walkable, accessible, or anyways, sorry about that. But the fact that the sidewalks lead to nowhere is a real concern, and I'm sure it'll appear on a priority list should the project go forward. I'm just looking for a clarification from Director Martin, and that is, what I understand is that normally what would happen after the official plan is approved, that the zoning would comply. So normally, I think I heard Ms. Martin say that the zoning of that property would have changed from industrial to residential in 2018. So we basically will be seeing this property come back to us at the second stage, and the site-specific provisions are those site-specific provisions that would include in the rezoning application, that we would include in the rezoning application, or would they only be considered at the next stage? Ms. Martin?
Thank you, Councillor Reckley. The amendment for each night is to amend the zoning bylaw to incorporate those site specifics. So that's the stage that we're currently at. The official plan designation, the residential use would conform to it because it's designated residential. So at this stage, we're just purely dealing with the just the conditions for the development in regards to setbacks, height, amenity space, open space, as presented in the report and tonight during my presentation. When it comes to more of those technical details, the site, the civil engineering, the roads, that's through the plan of subdivision, and that's the next process that'll have to go through. That's much more entailed, and it ends in an agreement with the developer. So at the end of the day, another process much more intensive than zoning. They're just seeking the permission from a zoning perspective to permit this use on the property.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barkley. I'll go to Councillor Strakian, and then I'll wrap up the public meeting unless there are other hands. And then we can deal with whether or not we'll address the recommendation provided by staff this evening or at a different time. Councillor Strakian.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Ms. Martin, you may have just answered that, but I got lost in some of the words that you were using. So pardon me if you're repeating yourself. So the recommendation before us is to support the zoning amendment to rezone from industrial to the residential third density, et cetera, to support the development of 50 townhouse dwelling units. So that last part about the support of the development of the 50 townhouse dwelling units is necessary for this zoning amendment. Is that correct?
That is correct. So the site-specific conditions will allow for the townhouse units to be built by permitting, through the residential third density zone townhouse units with the site-specific conditions for their development.
Understood. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, so we still are in the public meeting portion. I don't see any other hands. So last call to members of the public about whether or not they'd like to ask any other questions. If that's not the case, Council, then I'll close the meeting. The function tonight was to have a public meeting, which is provincially mandated to give those affected an opportunity to ask questions and for us to consider those comments in the context of the rezoning application. Certainly, if we need a little more time, we can certainly bring this recommendation back to council in a couple of weeks. No urgency necessarily to do it right this evening, but I defer to you. As you know, I can't move or second, so I defer to council colleagues in terms of what the appetite is. Mr. Demchuk, the one question I didn't ask is, you had acknowledged that perhaps the location of that garbage facility for 50 homes, which again isn't insignificant, right? So I'm assuming you're doing internal garbage collection, right? Not everyone is putting their garbage out. So with that in mind, you said that you would look at relocating or potentially look at mitigating. Like, quite honestly, I don't know how you mitigate, right, the collection of, garbage from 50 households. I don't know what the compost element of this would be. I don't know, Ms. Martin, in terms of composting, would everyone use their compost bin? As you know, that's a major waste reduction effort in our community. So from my perspective, it would be valuable if we had a little more clarity, Mr. Demchuk, certainly on the location of the garbage facility, just because of its size. And I'm not hearing you say that it's necessarily obvious that you can relocate it, and I don't know what mitigation would look like.
Sure. So thank you for the question, Mayor Peckford. So again, there's two garbage room locations. One that's adjacent behind some of the dwellings on Van Buren, and then there's another one that's kind of further internal to the site, closer to where the visitor parking spaces are located. We still have to sort some of those details out. So for example, if we can actually potentially combine the size of the garbage room into one that's away from the house on Van Buren and into that other structure, that would obviously be an ideal situation. The other consideration that we're looking into, and we've got to call our garbage contractors, GFL, et cetera. So because this is going to be a private pickup scenario for all these townhouse residents, we are looking into the opportunity whether or not perhaps that still curbside pickup is available on the days of garbage removal, and thereby we may not even perhaps need a second garbage room at all, or a garbage room at all for the proposed development. So these are things we are looking into. And those technical details, just being candid, have not been sorted out yet as part of the proposal.
Secondly, Ms. Martin, I know that you and I had that discussion about expanded infrastructure, pedestrian infrastructure on Van Buren, and where things would potentially shift, again, at the municipality's cost, because counties is not paying for our sidewalks. So it would be helpful to get a little more clarity on from our Public Works Department on what's the trigger to potentially move Van Buren up the list. This is certainly, a notable development just given its location and the number of homes in a smaller location. But, we often see larger developments that don't trigger sidewalks necessarily. So I guess it would be certainly, I think, useful to get a little more clarity from our Public Works staff on what they would anticipate given this potential development. So I have a couple of unanswered questions. So council, there's a motion on the table. I can entertain a motion to defer, a motion in regards to the current recommendation. Again, I pass it over to someone who is a member of council to either move things forward, or we can bring this back once we have a little more information. Councilor Barclay?
Because if we pass the zoning amendment tonight, it would be tied to 50 townhomes as part of the resolution. I would like to move to defer this to the next opportunity. I appreciate that we've had a chance that we might not have normally had to take a look at the zoning, because my understanding is that it really should have been taken care of 2018. And I don't think there's any appetite amongst the neighbors to keep it an industrial zone. But I think it's an opportunity maybe for the developer to come back to address a lot of the questions that we've had, and maybe the actual site plan approval process would happen faster. So anyways, I would move to defer.
And do I have a seconder? And then I'll recognize Councillor Chartier.
Sorry, that was my raising my hand.
Okay,
For a second.
thank you. All right. Councillor Wilson, is there anything you'd like to add at this stage? Okay. Okay. So Ms. Martin, again, I think just given some of the dialogue this evening, it would be super helpful if we could have a little more information on elements of the development that were raised this evening. So there is a motion to defer on the table to, I think, the next reasonably scheduled council meeting once we have some of that information. Any further comment or questions in regards to this? Okay, I'll call the vote. All in favor, please raise your hands. Okay. Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Martin and Mr. Demchuk. You did a wonderful job, really, I think, explaining pieces of it. So we really appreciate the level of detail, and expect you and Ms. Martin will have some additional conversations about how we can perhaps offer some reassurances moving forward. But we appreciate all the time you've spent with us this evening. It is extremely helpful. So appreciate that. Thank you. Okay. Council, I know we've been at it. I know we have two other matters, one of which is a public meeting. If I could just suggest a 3-minute break, and then we'll move to our next two items, and hopefully they won't take as long as this one did. That would be great. So I'll give you 5. To be fair, 3 is not really anything. Please take 5 minutes, grab a glass of water, and we'll come back. I'll turn on my camera. Thank you. Okay, colleagues, when you have a chance, please turn your camera back on and we'll get going in a minute or so. I think that's the 5, sadly. So it's a trade-off between a break now and an earlier evening. Okay. I think we have all the relevant players. Is that right, Ms. Babcock-Cormier?
I am just checking. Yes, we do.
Okay. So our clerk reminded me that I hadn't formally closed the public meeting in regards to 210 Van Buren. So council, just reminding you that, of course, we heard from the applicant and heard from a number of members of the public and had that opportunity to ask our own questions. At this point, any member of the who should wish to provide written comment regarding the proposed bylaw can still do so after the public meeting is adjourned. Written comment can be received up until the bylaw amendment is considered by council. Council members may, of course, continue to seek clarity on some of those outstanding items through interactions with staff. So I will now close the public meeting at 8:12 p.m. And I will now move on to the next one. And Ms. Babcock-Cormier has kindly provided me with a script on paper. So council will now hold a virtual public meeting to consider an application to amend the zoning of the lands located at 819 Craig Road from rural to rural special exception to permit an additional residential unit greater than 50% of the gross floor area of the primary dwelling unit with a proposed detached garage. This amendment will also recognize a reduction in setback of 17.2 meters to the municipal drain, Councilor Barkley, for the proposed septic systems on the lands. I must advise that this meeting is your opportunity to voice any objections or concerns you may have with respect to the proposed bylaw amendment. If an appellant does not provide oral comments at this meeting or written submissions before council adopts the amendment, the local planning appeal tribunal may refuse to consider objections. Any persons wishing further notice of council's decision concerning this matter should give their name, address, postal code to the director of planning. Contact information can be found, of course, on the notice of public meeting and will be provided at the end of presentation. Anyone wishing to ask a question can do so by raising their hand option during this meeting. When asking a question, please identify yourself and your address. Is there anyone here for this public meeting in regards to 819 Craig Road? See anyone? Ms. Martin, are you aware of anyone who's joining for tonight?
Your worship, I believe that Mr. Cavan is here as part of this application.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm here now. I just unmuted. Sorry about that.
Okay. Welcome. And Mr. Cavan, are you the applicant or representing the applicant or a member of the public?
I'm representing the applicant.
Okay, thank you. Welcome. So Ms. Martin, over to you for an initial presentation. Is that right?
That is correct, your worship.
Okay.
So our last public meeting tonight is to consider an application for 819 Craig Road. Next slide, please. The property is located within the rural area. It is located on Craig Road, just to the west of Murphy Road. Next slide, please. As you can see, the property is quite heavily vegetated throughout. It's a largely a very rural area, and there's evidence of existing rural residential uses within the area. Next slide, please. So the subject lands are located about halfway down Craig Road, west of County Road 25. The property is 46.3 hectares in size, 114 acres roughly, with 84 meters of frontage on Craig Road. The development footprint of this property is located within the front 2 hectares. So the balance of the lands at the back remain untouched and undeveloped. Surrounding land uses include larger rural properties as well as rural residential clusters along Craig Road. The property is designated rural on Schedule A of the municipality's official plan and is currently zoned rural within the municipality's comprehensive zoning bylaw. Next slide, please. So the applicant is proposing to construct a rather large accessory structure, and there will be a separate septic system that is servicing it. So the structure is to provide additional space. The property owner is has a rather large car collection and would like to have the space to facilitate it, as well as to provide additional recreational space for the individuals. There's already a pre-existing house, which is quite large on the property. And I want to note that the policies that were referenced in the mayor's blurb are from the original application. Since this application was originally submitted last year, we did delay the public meeting as there were some concerns from the RVCA in regards to setback to the drain the water course that runs on the property. The municipality has amended the zoning bylaw to take out a lot of the restrictive provisions regarding accessory structures, so those are no longer in play at this time. We're strictly just dealing with the setback to that water course in relation to the septic system. Next slide, please. So this is the rendering of the proposed accessory structure. Again, relative size, there is already a very large single detached residence on the property. So the structure would complement the existing structure that's there. And again, it's being developed on a very large property. So we're not concerned in regards to lot coverage, just in the fact that there is a lot of space for this accessory structure to be located. Next slide, please. So when looking at our policies, starting with the provincial policy statement, the PPS does permit on our rural lands residential development that is locally appropriate, and further provides, again, that mix of housing and forms of residential uses in the rural area, which could include additional residential units. I do note that the intent of the structure is not to provide an additional residential unit, but certainly our new updated policies in the future, should they wish to create an additional residential unit in this building, they could certainly do so. Next slide, please. Consistent with the policies of the PPS, our county official plan recognizes the limited development that is compatible with the rural landscape, and that can be maintained on rural services. And again, the zoning amendment would meet our policies and the intent of the county OP, as the amendment permits the limited rural development that is appropriate on the rural services. Next slide, please. And our own official plan follows very similar policies. We do permit accessory structures and additional residential units in our rural area. And again, we have specific policies in regards to additional residential units. So again, there's always a future possibility should the property owner wish to use the structure for such a use, they'd be able to. Section 12.20 of the official plan speaks to setbacks to water courses, and it establishes a 30-meter setback from the high water mark of a water course. So the policy provides us with some flexibility. It's important to note that the water course that has been identified on the property is also a municipal drain, which have a smaller setback of 15 meters, which is identified in our zoning bylaw. So it is reasonable that municipal drains are one of the special circumstances in which we would allow for reduced setback. Next slide, please. So the proposed zoning for the property, again, would just address the fact that the sewage disposal system is going to be located 17.2 meters from the top of bank of what we call the Como municipal drain. So to that end, the zoning would just provide that site specific to allow the septic to be located a little closer. And again, it has to, the requirement is more so just given the topography of the land and the existing, where the structure is going to be located, and ensuring that there's enough separation distance from the septic field that's associated with the house. Next slide, please. I do note that the applicant and the property owner have been working very closely with the Rideau Valley Conservation Authority in regards to the setback. The RVCA has been quite heavily involved in this file, and we have not received any comments from any surrounding neighbor, property owners, or members of the public in regard to this application. And to that end, that ends my formal presentation. I can certainly take questions, but Mr. Cavan, as the representative for the property owner, is here to respond to any questions that council may have.
All right, council colleagues, Council Barclay, predictably, perhaps, you're going to ask about municipal drainage. How did I know? Council Barclay, go ahead.
Well, yeah, I've been noted. It's an obsession of mine. Through you, Madam Mayor, to Director Martin, what is the minimum setback for residential properties? Well, my first question is Is the septic dedicated to this new structure, or is it part of the existing residential unit?
The septic would be dedicated to the new structure, Council Beckley.
Yeah, okay, so the second question would be, I know I've had RVCA to my property, and one of the things that they measured was the distance between my well and the septic tank. Is there a minimum distance between, let's say, wells and septic? And is that less than the 56 meters that is indicated here to the municipal drain? Do you happen to know what that is?
Without referring
Yeah.
to my building officials, Council Barkley, the
Yep.
building code would dictate separation distances from a well and the septic.
Yeah.
I'm not certain as to what that setback is, but certainly that would be reviewed at the building permit stage.
Okay. Well, it seems to me just from RVCA being on my property that it's 56 meters sounds plenty, even though I guess normally it would be what? It's a reduced setback because it's a municipal drain. Normally, what would be the setback to a water course, let's say?
30 meters
30
is what the
meters.
zoning bylaw dictates. But again, we do permit, where it's a municipal drain, a reduced setback.
Yeah.
But the fact that the municipal drain is also identified as a water course is what's imposing the 30-meter setback.
Okay. And sorry, maybe I missed that in your presentation. What is the setback that they're asking for?
Just over 17 meters from
17. Okay.
the top of bank of the drain.
Yeah, and the reason for that is you said topographical features. It's difficult to locate the septic anyplace else.
It's based on the site design, that is correct, because they're trying to keep it within proximity to the existing dwelling without disrupting further lands on the property.
Right.
So based on just ensuring there's adequate separation distance from the septic field associated with the house, that's the location that was agreed to through lots of consultation with Rideau Valley.
Rideau Valley. Okay, great. Thank you. Those are all my drainage questions. Thanks.
And Ms. Martin, I don't see any other hands, colleagues. So seeing none, just very quickly, Ms. Martin, you have confirmed that there have been no comments from members of the public, and would there have been neighbors outside of that 120-meter notification buffer, if you will?
So the municipality met the requirements of the Planning Act on the circulation of this notice, which is 120 meters buffered out from the boundary of the property. So it would include the whole 114 acres. And certainly we also do post, in accordance with the Planning Act, a sign on the property indicating that there is an application. So anyone driving by would be able to see that, to stop and read the sign to see what was going on. The notice that's posted on the property is the exact same as to what's circulated to neighbors.
Okay, so those immediate neighbors would have been notified, correct? That's what
That
I'm
is
trying
correct.
to do? Okay, excellent. And then we have not seen this application before, is that correct? This is a new application?
So, Your Worship, the application was scheduled for a public meeting in the fall, but it
Yep.
was through conversation with the Rideau Valley Conservation Authority over the setback to the water course that became concerning. Originally, we were looking at provisions in regard to our accessory structure policies, which again, we have changed in that time to help alleviate some of these applications that were getting caught up in process by some very restrictive policies. So to that end, because of the water course, the RVCA, we did defer that public meeting to tonight. So it is a bit of an outstanding application that we're bringing to finality. But certainly, council may have seen the original information as part of that original application. But everything's been revised to reflect the matter tonight, which is just dealing with the septic.
Okay, and again, no public comments, right? When you had initially planned to bring it to our attention, there was no public comments at that time?
I'd have to go back and check, Your Worship. I don't believe so. I do note, and Ms. Wood has just sent me a message through Teams to say that there was a resident that came in and inquired as to what was going on, but certainly didn't wish to provide any objections. They were just more curious as to what was being proposed.
Okay, this is a very large property, obviously, so impacts one would expect would be fairly minimal. Is that fair to assume?
That is correct, Your Worship. And it's going to be located off the road closer to the house. So it's not as if it's, right at the front property line. It's going to be set back further.
Indeed. Okay. Mr. Kevin is here. Mr. Kevin, we are in a public meeting. Is there anything you'd like to add?
Nope, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Kevin, how long have you, so you're representing the client. You are not the client. Is that right?
Correct. I'm just a designer trying just to get through this permit process.
Okay, sounds good. All right, I see no other hands from council colleagues. I see no one wishing to speak from the public. If that is the case, we will now move to close the meeting. I will say that any member of the public who should wish to provide written comment regarding the proposed bylaw amendment can do so after the public meeting is adjourned. A written comment can be received up until the bylaw amendment is considered by council, which I believe will be this evening. It is intended that council will consider the bylaw amendment after this public meeting. And I'll now move to close the public meeting at 8:26 p.m. And I'll just move back to the recommendation on the table, and that is that council approve and enact bylaw 4422 to amend the comprehensive zoning bylaw to amend the lands legal described as concession 4, part of lot 8 from the rural zone to the rural special exception zone to permit a septic system to be located 17.2 meters from a municipal drain to support the construction of an additional residential unit within a proposed accessory garage. So I'll look for a mover and a seconder then for that particular. Councillor Barclay, motion. Councillor Strachan, thank you. Any further comments or questions in regards to this recommendation? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All in favor, please. Thank you. Okay, that passes. Mr. Kevin, thank you for joining us. We do appreciate it.
Great, thank you.
Okay, take care. Okay, colleagues, we are moving on. We have tonight the site plan approval for 2680 Concession Road. This is Habitat for Humanity, and I believe Mr. Shute, Adrian Shute, you have been waiting patiently. So thank you for that. I know you have young children at home, so I'm sure it's been a bit of a saga, but I understand. Amy, will you be providing some information up front before we hear from Mr. Shute?
Yes, Your Worship.
Okay.
So we'll just go to the next slide, please. So just a quick background, it's been quite a process to get to here. So we started back in 2019 when the municipality first severed land and donated 2,094 square meters of land that was part of the Kemptville campus to Habitat for Humanity. So 3 years ago, we started this process to provide land to create some affordable housing. Council passed official plan amendment number 2 on December 17th, 2019. So that would allow for a higher density on the property than what was permitted in our official plan. It also redesignated the property from the agricultural designation to residential. And then it permitted that, again, that density bonusing greater than 35% on the property. Habitat for Humanity has submitted a concurrent zoning bylaw amendment and the site plan application in June of 2021. And the zoning bylaw amendment was approved back in July of 2021. Next slide, please. So as part of the site plan submission as identified by the municipality through our consultation process, a traffic impact study, stormwater management report, engineering drawings, and then addressing grading and drainage were submitted to the municipality as part of the development process. The application, along with all the reporting and drawings, were provided to relevant departments and agencies for review and comments, and all comments have been addressed and circulated. Stakeholders are satisfied with the site plan in its current form. So from our perspective, all the engineering documents to allow for the site to progress have been finalized and agreed to. Next slide, please. So just a few things in regards to the site plan to highlight. So a traffic impact study was provided. The report considered how pedestrian traffic would reasonably be expected to travel off the subject lands. And so the report did identify a gap in the pedestrian traveling network along Concession Road, where pedestrians would be unable to reach the Concession Road pedestrian crossing and ultimately connect with the sidewalks and multi-use paths within the municipality. So with Public Works, we've noted this deficiency. And as Habitat for Humanity has partnered with the municipality, we'll be creating needed rental units. The upgrades necessary for pedestrian connection have been noted and will be created during the next available upgrades on Concession Road. So the municipality is aware that there is a deficiency in regard to just that connectivity piece, but certainly we'll be considering it as we move forward with when upgrades do occur to Concession Road. Next slide, please. Servicing and stormwater management report was submitted as part of the development application. It outlined the stormwater requirements, and they've been found to be satisfactory to the municipality. There is an existing service line that do run through the lands and an easement to legally recognize the servicing infrastructure and protect any future maintenance and upgrades. That was not picked up back in 2019 when the lands were originally severed, but municipal staff are now working to survey and define this location and ensure that we have the appropriate easement agreement in place that is created as part of that registration process. And certainly Habitat for Humanity has been fantastic in identifying and working with us to ensure that we just protect that easement and that service lateral that heads to the campus. Next slide, please. I just start another visual reminder of the development of the 15 units that will exist in townhouse unit form for the property. Certainly much needed affordable rental units within North Grenville, located in a key strategic location with the Kemptville campus surrounding the property, as well as many local schools, and of course the hospital and the downtown, not too far walking distance from this property. Next slide, please. So it is at this time that staff are seeking direction that council authorized the Director of Planning and Development to sign the site plan agreement for 2680 Concession Road. So this will allow for us to enter into an agreement and just have the authorization to finalize all the documentation that's been submitted to date and approved by the municipality. And at this time, that ends my formal presentation. If there's any questions, I think we've seen this development, quite extensively over the last 3 years, and I know there's a lot of eagerness to see shovels in the ground and to get the ball rolling.
Councillor Wilson, please.
Thank you, Amy, through you, Mayor Peckford. I wondered if, for the general public, if you'd like to explain how the Habitat for Humanity houses, are they through ownership? Are they rentals? How does that function?
And maybe we can, Mr. Shute, would you like to take that question?
Maybe, perhaps, yeah.
I can answer that
that's
question.
Yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Okay.
For sure. So these are a conventional Habitat for Humanity model, by and large. So they will be ownership of those homes, but they will, as an organization, Habitat for Humanity always assists our families to ensure that they are retained as affordable units. We will be taking funding as well from multiple levels of government for this project, including, of course, the support from the municipality, as well as the federal government, which always has checks and balances to ensure that those are maintained with affordability for at least aiming for a 20-year period at minimum. So these will be an ownership model, yes, to allow the homeowners to build equity, but it is intended to be an affordable ownership model.
Thank you.
And I think one of the, I'm sorry, just to clarify, Mr. Shute, one of the reduced barriers is that you don't need to accumulate the same down payment that you might otherwise, if you were just doing this on your own, that the Habitat provides some assistance or with a down payment, and there were some cases no down payment is required.
Actually, yes. And so in this case, my understanding is the way that this is looking, and of course, we're getting close to the point where we can really start to finalize those details. Once we have these plans finalized, we are hoping that there will be no down payment whatsoever on these homes. So there shouldn't be a down payment whatsoever for all eligible families.
Okay. Councillor Wilson, I apologize for interrupting. Go ahead.
No problem. The other question I had is looking at the site plan, and I'm late to the game on this, whether the site plan and everything has already been shown. There doesn't appear to be a turnaround in there. It's just a straight lane in. Am I confused on that, or?
Mr.
I can answer if that's appropriate. Yeah. No, there is not a turnaround in there, and that isn't required given the development size. And Amy, you probably have much more experience on these specific size of developments than I do. But under the that size of development, the Ontario Building Code does not stipulate anything, and certainly neither does the fire restriction. So that is wide enough to be considered a fire lane. So it's an adequate, there's adequate space for maneuvering if vehicles are required to maneuver. So there's no concern there. And from a resident access perspective, there isn't any particular need for a turnaround at the back, given that the garbage is at the front. We've danced around with our garbage, much like your earlier meeting. So we've got it up at the front, so there shouldn't be much need for any significantly large vehicular traffic in that space. So it really is just for the cars of the residents.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions, colleagues? Councillor Stracan?
Thank you very much for the presentation, and through you, Madam Mayor. I guess a general comment. Thank you for clarifying the ownership status and so on that Councillor Wilson asked about. And just a general comment, I'm quite happy to see the size of the dwellings that will be built, and that what the space that there will be able to accommodate, because we often get stuck with affordable housing questions, and it winds up being smaller buildings and smaller builds that don't accommodate larger families and so on. And certainly there's a need for that in our community. So I'm very happy to see that. And overall, I think as was mentioned previously, we're all eager to see some shovels get into the ground and the work be completed. So thank you very much for your time this evening.
Any other comments?
We're excited too. That's my only other comment.
Council colleagues, anything else? Okay. Mr. Shute, I did have a question. I have two. The first one was, what I know that when we initially severed the land, and of course this was a recommendation of the Mayor's Task Force on Affordable Housing, and we were so thrilled after a presentation from your partner Habitat Group of Leads in 1,000 Islands that you came together to support what is a very ambitious 15 homes project, and to Councillor Stracan's point, that can comfortably accommodate families in particular with multiple children. With that in mind, I do recall one of the early meetings where we were severing land, and there was some comments about setbacks. I think you're building this development in close proximity to an existing residential home, and I'm just curious, maybe Ms. Martin or Mr. Shute, you can refresh my memory on those setbacks to existing properties. I don't know if it's in this site plan or not.
Thank you, Worship. So the site plan would detail the setbacks from the units. I don't believe there was an issue. I'd have to pull up the zoning bylaw amendment to see, but I'm pretty certain we were able to meet the setbacks in regards to that property line with neighbor. And I believe, Adrian, correct me if I'm wrong, I think there's a fence as well to be required along that property line, but I might be mistaken. I need to pull the
that's my recollection also. I don't actually have that site plan open, but yeah, my recollection is 4.5 meters springs to mind, which I think is pretty standard on this density of residential. And yes, there is a fence that is spec to go. There are fences between the units in the backyard to separate backyards, but also against adjacent residential properties, certainly.
Okay, that's just helpful, I think, for those who are curious, right, who've been in the area for a while. And just quickly, second question is just in regards to, I know that you're right on the periphery of the campus, so we had some interest back in the day and a little bit of concern from our campus stakeholders, et cetera. I know just a couple of weeks ago, I encouraged the campus board and Habitat to have a chat so that certainly Habitat could well explain the intentions, the goals, the objectives. And in the end, just, certainly council, when we were doing this 2-3 years ago, certainly expressed to our stakeholders on the campus that this would be a project that we felt would integrate well, especially given where it's located on the campus. I don't know, Mr. Shute, if you're involved on that side, but I believe a conversation was had with Habitat just to explain the nature, the size, the intentions of this project. Can you confirm?
Yes, absolutely. And it did go very well. We've been looking to work further with the campus to do some really interesting things there. And as a nonprofit partner, I think we're going to be able to work with them further in the coming weeks. So I'm actually heading down to Camp Philip in town on Friday to meet with the facilities manager there to go over what they've offered us actually to help out by providing power, by providing storage space as well. To get us going in parking. So that's one of the really key factors from a building perspective that we were concerned about. And I know that I've addressed that with Amy as well, that we certainly don't want to block up Concession Road. I know you guys have a great big party coming in September that we'll certainly be around for. It is exciting. I haven't been to the international plowing match since it was in the Almont Carlton Place, so we'll probably be out for that. But we definitely, that was a big concern, and the campus has really stepped up and offered a couple of solutions. So we're going to go walk through those in person on Friday. So it's going very well. So thanks again to all of council for brokering that relationship.
Great. Okay, good to hear. Anything else, council colleagues, before we move on? Council Barkley?
Sorry, through you, Madam Mayor, to Adrian. It may be early days, but I'd be curious with the 4-bedroom units as to know, is there a price point that we're looking at?
The way that the model works, all of our pricing for homes, because we do sell the homes to residents, we are regulated by CRA as a charity. So all of the homes are actually sold at an appraised value. So that will really depend on however you want to call it, the flavor of the day when it comes to real estate pricing at the time of completion. So we appraise the homes at completion, and that appraised value is what the residents will be paying as their cost. At the end of the day, though, the most important factor is that we ensure an affordable mortgage payment. So regardless of what the house price, be it 300,000, be it 500,000, be it 700,000, we will hope not for that last number. But if that were to be the case, we will still maintain an affordable mortgage payment, which means it will be less than 30% of their gross household income. So regardless of the cost, it effectively will extend the mortgage to continue an affordable mortgage to ensure that the family can maintain an affordable residence.
It's a great model. Thank you.
So less about price point and more about entry into the housing market as supported by Habitat, correct?
Absolutely, yeah, and that's the best way that we like to kind of explain it, because I mean, ultimately we end up carrying the balance of that mortgage if it is higher, and since the mortgages that we provide are interest free, it means that it gets extended for a longer term. But yeah, that is it in a nutshell. Yes, it's just an entry into the housing market without that down payment barrier.
And then just quickly, is it 2 stories, 3 stories? I'm just looking at that site plan again.
Yeah, so there is the units are 2-story units. There are some single floor units. So the ultimate structure height, the top structure will be 3 stories, because there are some stacked units above barrier free units. So there are some fully accessible units, which are main floor with 3-bedroom units above them, which brings it to a total of 3 stories.
Okay. And do the 3 stories include basements or no?
There are basements under all of the units. Yes, we do have basements between all of the units, much to the dismay, I'm sure, of some of our works, our building team who I met with recently, or your building team I met with. We found a way to make it work, but there are some common spaces in those basements to facilitate easy. We've tried to pull all of our utilities into those basements and create common basement spaces, just to ensure that the front facade of the building is as attractive as possible, rather than having 15 meters stuck all over it for gas, for hydro and everything. So we really are trying to make sure that it stays as tidy as possible towards Concession Road. So all of those will happen inside the basement, and then all units will also have storage space, whether they have a direct access to a basement, or even if they're a stacked unit, they will have dedicated basement storage space to make sure that there is on-site storage for all units.
Okay, great to hear. Thank you. Any other questions, colleagues, before we move on? Not seeing any hands. So I'll just go to the recommendation. That is that council authorize the Director of Planning and Development to sign the site plan agreement for 2680 Concession Road to permit the construction of a 15-unit planned affordable townhouse development, subject to further review by the municipal solicitor. One last question is coming to mind, and that is lighting. And I couldn't quite see that on the site plan. Mr. Shute, can you just speak to that?
Yeah, absolutely. And so as through part of our site plan agreements, we do touch on lighting. Given the distance between the homes, and I don't have that number off the top of my head, I think the aisle width is approximately 6 meters, plus some offsets from that to the houses. There is no provision for post-mounted lighting here. There is adequate lighting from the lights that are going to be on the buildings. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that there is something of a night sky bylaw or something similar within the North Grenville municipality. And so all of our exterior light fixtures would be compliant with that. But we have not planned any light standards specifically, or any parking lot lighting per se, because all cars park in front of their own units. There is no need for us to provide local, like a public lighting, if you will.
Okay, good to hear. And of course, we have the hospital and many other public institutions for which there's lighting, but we just wanted to clarify what the plan was, but that makes sense to me. Council, I'll look for a mover and a seconder. I don't see any other hands. Council Strachan, Council Wilson, thank you. And that, of course, is as per the recommendation I've just read. And Mr. Shute, I know we're working with Habitat's team overall to amplify some fundraising and get people on the build site. And council colleagues, I haven't given you notice of this, but we are signed up to be on site. I think just after the IPM, so that we can do a build day on behalf of the municipality. So more information coming, but that will be part of our sweat equity, if you will, into the site. So, and I understand that some municipal staff will be given similar opportunities. So look forward to getting your hands dirty, Mr. Shute. I'll call the vote on the motion, seeing no other comments or questions. All in favor, please. Good, thank you. Okay, that carries. Thank you, Adrian, for your patience. I know it was a bit of a long evening, but we appreciate all of the work of Habitat and look forward to you guys getting started.
Absolutely. We look forward to making a mark in this community and joining the community for the next couple of years. Absolutely. So
yeah, for sure.
We'll be around a lot. You're going to see a lot of us.
Okay, sounds good. Just consider moving out here. No problem at all. Welcome new residents all the time.
It's discussed frequently. We're looking at an office. We'd like to have a better presence in the community. So it's in discussion.
All right. Take care. All the best.
Thank you.
Okay, colleagues. That brings us to section M. There is no correspondence, other business. I'll ask, are there any notices of motions this evening from council colleagues? Seeing none. I believe, Ms. Babcock Cormier, that we've dealt with all the bylaws before us this evening. Is that correct?
That's correct, Your Worship.
All right. So then we're just looking at period for questions from any member of the media or community. Do we have any questions via email?
I confirm that we have not received any questions that haven't already been addressed in the public meetings.
Okay.
Where's Jennifer Westendorp?
Yes, exactly. I thought she'd be here before. And Ms. Babcock Cormier, did I hear you suggest there were questions, but they were already answered?
Through the public meeting process with respect to the matters heard this evening. So those were addressed, I believe, to Amy directly, to Director Martin, sorry.
And that was through members of the public who were wanting to weigh in on the Van Buren property, is that right?
That's correct, who attended this evening and have brought forward the questions directly. Okay, perfect. Then I'll go to close of meeting, confirmation bylaw. This is that bylaw 4522 to confirm the proceedings of council. At its regular meeting held on May 11th, 2020, be adopted and passed. A mover and a seconder, please. Council, I need a mover and a seconder. Councilor Wilson, Councilor Strachian, thank you. I'll call the question on confirmation bylaw. All in favor? Good. And now I need a motion to adjourn. Councilor Barkley, would you like to move a motion to adjourn?
I will, but I'd like to wish the clerk a happy birthday before I move.
Thank you.
Okay, so I move.
Indeed.
Move. Thank you.
Is there a seconder? Thank you. Councilor Strachian, yes, well, we were keeping her birthday partly a secret, but it is good to wish her a happy 39th birthday and may she remain 39 for a very long time. Sorry to tie up your meeting, Ms. Babcock Cormier. Thank you for your patience and commitment to the municipality of North Grenville. I will call the question. All in favor, please, of adjournment. All right.
Happy birthday, Heather.
Yes.
Thank you.
Safe travels, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Take care.
Have a good
Bye.
night.